Good morning. Welcome. We're going to look at the Civil War. We're at sea, believe it or not. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but this is where they actually start putting metal on top of the boats and make them ironclad so that they can go to war and things don't like get sunk and stuff. So they're called clad, which means it's attached over top of something, okay? So let's go ahead and look at all the innovations that occurred during the Civil War. Remember I talked about how when we go to war, medicine gets better and weapons get better and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to look at today. So we're going to be covering page 258 to 261 today. And then you're going to do the worksheets after. And I'm going to tell you the question that you have to answer. Okay? So, war at sea. So the U.S. Navy, the Union Army, yes, remember we said once United States, U.S., it means the Union, blockaded the South. Remember we talked about how they were going to do that. There's actually a picture in your book about how they were going to do that, and they did not let ships come in or go out. So their big thing when they were blockading the southern ports was to stop cotton from going out. That was the South's main cash crop, and it went out to England, and England made clothes with it and blankets and all that kind of stuff. And England didn't have their own supplies, so it was very important for the Southerners to send that out. The money that England would give them, they could then use to buy weapons. But if you can't get your products out, you can't get the money in, and it's very hard to buy weaponry. So that is the goal that the North had, was to cut off the South's supply of money and cut off the supply of weapons in that way. The problem with this was that the South has over 100 miles of coastline that the North had to blockade. And so they had these cute little boats. Well, I mean, they weren't like little, but they were fast and they were a lot smaller than the big ships that were doing the blockade. And so what they would do is they would run between the bigger ships really fast. They were actually called blockade runners. I know. Imagine what a unique name. Running a blockade with your boat, and you're called blockade runners. Okay, so these blockade runners would go in between the boats, the bigger boats of the North, and they would bring food and supplies in. So as the war progresses, the blockade actually gets tighter and tighter, and so those little boats can't get in anymore, and that's what happens. So the Confederacy doesn't really have a lot of anything. So they had like two ships, okay? And they had gotten one that the U.S. left, the Union had left. And so they decided to take the one the Union had left, and they renamed it the CSS, yes, Confederate States of a ship, okay, Confederate States ship, Virginia, okay? And they took the Virginia and they covered it with the iron, like I told you, from the waterline down. And when they covered it, they clad it in iron. The iron was like, I don't want to say sheets. It was like plates of iron, and they were 2 inches thick at least. And they would put them right over top of the wood, okay? And they also mounted cannons on top of the ironclad ships. And when the CSS Virginia went to her first battle, she was the only ironclad ship at the time. And so she was able to sink a Union ship, but as the ship was firing at her, the Union ship, the cannonballs were just bouncing off. So remember we talked about this during the Revolutionary War, how the USS Constitution did not have iron, but the way the wood was, the cannonballs bounced off, and they called their old Ironsides, and they still call their old Ironsides today. Although that one didn't have iron, these do. These are the first ones that do. So the Union goes, whoa, what's going on? And they say, we can do the same thing. So they grab one of their ships, the USS Monitor, which means United States ship, USS Monitor, and they put iron on the outside of that ship as well. So the next time they go to war, it's the Monitor against the Virginia, and they are shooting at each other. The cannonballs are bouncing off both of them. They'd shoot, they'd bounce off, they'd shoot, they'd bounce off. And what ends up happening is neither ship sinks, neither ship wins. They just kind of both kind of go off into their own thing, okay? So that is one of the new inventions that come out of the Civil War is ironclad ships. Another one is called rifling. So they had their cannons rifled. So what it means is you take the barrel of the cannon and you kind of put swirls in it, like if you think about a drill bit, okay? And you kind of, that's what the inside kind of looks like. It just keeps going and going. And so what that does is when the cannonball goes down, it's just not being thrown, okay? So like I could take a ball and I just throw it. And it doesn't go very far, it doesn't go very fast, and it may not go exactly where I am. But if I put it down a tube that is circular, it's going to give it spin, which is then going to protrude it a lot further. And it's going to be more accurate, okay? So that's what they did with the cannons. They rifled them. That way they could go further, they could be more accurate, you could really shoot what you're looking at, okay? And they put those on the ironclad ships. Another thing they did was they took the cannons and they put them on a platform that could rotate. Because before that, you kind of had to like turn the whole ship if you wanted to do something. So what they did was they just took it and you could just turn the cannon. You wouldn't have to turn the whole ship, okay? It's a lot easier, don't you think, to just turn part of it instead of trying to turn the whole ship, okay? So that's another thing that they did. Another invention was the guns. So when they went into the Civil War, they had the same muskets that they had when they came out of the Revolutionary War. Remember, we talked about how you had to have two teeth that joined together to be in the army. So you could rip it, the little packet of gunpowder, and pour it down and pour down the bullets and all that stuff and ram it all down. Remember, we talked about that? So that's what they started the war out with. But then they developed two new guns. One was called a breech loading rifle, and that loaded from the back, which allowed it to go way faster. And then they called a repeating rifle. So a repeating rifle is more like what we have today. You can shoot 7 times in this one before you had to reload. So you didn't have to do that after every single time. You could shoot 7 first and then reload. Okay. Another big thing is railroads. Now they had some, but the railroads really developed during this time, and the railroads are used a ton in the North, and they are used to move troops and supplies as quickly as possible. It takes a lot less time on a railroad to move things than it does to march men and horses and pull wagons, okay? So the railroad becomes a very important thing at this time. In fact, it becomes so important that the Confederates try to blow up railroad tracks of the Union try to blow up railroad tracks of the Confederacy, again, to stop those supplies. Because if you can stop the supplies, people run out of things, they're not as willing to fight, right? If you don't have food and you don't have weapons, you don't have ammunition, you're not like, yay, let's go to the battle, okay? All right, another thing is the telegraph. So the telegraph was developed, and Grant used it in a very special way. As he moved his troops further into the South or further to the East, because remember he fought in the West, then he fought in the South, okay? He would have his soldiers lay telegraph wire. That way they could send the signals, and Grant would go ahead and always tell his soldiers where they were supposed to go, his other generals, yeah? And he would go and he would talk to Washington, he would talk, Washington, D.C., the capital. He would talk to Lincoln, he would talk to Seward, he would talk to the people that were there, okay? So, and so this also became a big thing as the Confederacy goes and they try to cut the lines, because that would be like cutting communication, okay? All right, so they use something called Morse code, and I put a link on here for you to watch a video about Morse code and about sending Morse code. I think we've done that before with 3rd grade, but I just wanted to refresh your memory, okay? All right, so that is our talk for today about some of the new innovations in the Civil War. So let's go ahead and again look at our people, okay? This time I'm going to mix them up north and south. Are you ready? All right, so this is Jefferson Davis, very good. And he was the president of the Confederacy. This is George McClellan, very good. He was the second general that Abraham Lincoln got that was in charge of the Potomac, the Army of the Potomac, okay? This is Abraham Lincoln, yes, the President of the United States. This is, very good, James Longstreet, a general for the Confederacy. This is Winfield Scott, very good. He is a general for the Union Army and was the first general that Abraham Lincoln picked to run the Union Army. This is, very good, Robert E. Lee, and he was the general, the biggest general, most important general of the Confederacy, but he was the leader of that, yes, and he planned out Gettysburg and stuff, which we'll talk about later. This is Ulysses S. Grant, unconditional surrender grant, okay? Remember, he's laying telegraph lines. He knows when to fight, when to blockade. He becomes Abraham Lincoln's general of the Union Army and is instrumental in winning many battles and ultimately the war. Okay, this is Thomas Stonewall Jackson, very good. Remember, he was shot by his own men one night. They were scared and they accidentally shot him and he actually died from that, right? This is William Tecumseh Sherman, very good. And we're going to talk about his march to the sea, okay? That's what he's most famous for, is his march to the sea, where he starts in Atlanta, he goes across to the Atlantic Ocean, okay? This is Jeb Stuart. He is also a general of the Confederacy. This is Ambrose Burnside. Remember the sideburns, okay? And he is with the Fredericksburg. All right, and I think I covered them all. Yes, okay? So keep studying your guys, okay? Go ahead, read this, do your worksheets, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.